Good morning. This is Gavin Duckworth with Functional Products. I'm the Vice President of National Accounts at Functional Products, and I'm going to welcome you to spend about the next 25 minutes with me talking about some very interesting new chemistry that we have. And so this will be the session for the 10:30 to 11 virtual room number 9. So just to get started, let me talk a little bit about Functional Products. We were founded in 1985. We are a full service additive supplier. We've had a bit of focus in the past regards to tackifiers and bio-based, but that makes us experts in polymer chemistry. And so we really focus our efforts in helping our customers with custom solutions, and we do a lot of searching and finding appropriate chemistry that you can do your research with. In 2020, we expanded our plant. We have added to our lab. We've added some PhDs to our lab and some real expertise to help with the polymer chemistry. Just to talk briefly about who we are. When I mentioned tackifiers, we have somewhere around 40 commercial tackifiers. We have a lot of them on the shelf too, but we can design tackifiers, which polymers inside tackifiers, for about any type of application, including bio-based, food grade, and water-based. With that, we've evaluated, I've lost count of how many polymers over the last, 20 years. And that really makes us expert in the field in evaluating those particular chemistry that goes into formulations. A little bit of new initiatives, which I will talk about today. This new unique base stock. This is going to look a little bit like a polymer, but it is officially at a base stock. We also have polymer acrylates in our line now that we were doing a lot of formulating work and helping our customers with. We have some new olefin copolymers in our line. We've expanded our bio-based package chemistry. We've added some grease components, and we've also done a lot of design work with other types of base stocks and esters. So the agenda briefly today is I'm going to talk a little bit about just formulating with traditional chemistry, and then look at this new unique this base stock called V705, and then a quick summary. So, as a formulator, I don't telling you anything at this point, but the number one there is supply interruptions. So having a backup supply is critical in today's world. Of course, you're always looking at old formulations. There's new market trends, price increases, discontinued additives, new customers, your customers trying to solve a technical problem, competitors, employee turnover. So these are the kind of the issues that you face day to day in your field. So, looking at a bit of motivation for you is, new high performance additive chemistry and fluids come out every year. So you want to make yourself different in the workplace. You want to help your management and your sales team and your marketers to bring new products to your portfolio. And just briefly, we've discovered, and I'll talk a little bit about this, that formulating cost out, normally, especially older formulations, you can take out 10 to 20% by optimizing those. So I will talk a little bit about that today also. So I'm going to show a little bit of a study, but considerations, first thing when you're looking at viscometrics, you're looking at the viscosity grade versus the viscosity index that you need, the pour point or / Brookfield, and then shear stability. And, to be able to do this, economics is crucial. So you want to hit those parameters and, try to make yourself a little bit different in the marketplace, but also you have to control those costs. So, looking at traditional chemistry, you should be familiar with all of these, the polyisobutenes, the olefin copolymers, the polymer acrylates, and then the styrene copolymers. This is a very busy slide. I won't go through all of this, but you'll see some advantages and disadvantages of each of those. So, when you're using polymers to change the viscosity of a formulation, and here's an example. The viscosity index on the left axis, and on the bottom axis is just a PMA or a typical polymer. But this is true for all polymers typically. You can get too much polymer in there. And what happens is your pour point goes sideways, your Brookfield gets worse, and in some cases, as the graph shows, lowers the VI. So there is a limit to the amount of polymers that I showed on the previous slide that you can put in a formulation. So, this is thinking about this a bit, around the dilution theory of a polymer. So as you add in more polymer, you're going to get entanglements. And, you got to find a fine line, because the entanglements will also trap oil and do other, it'll lift viscosity, but it will trap oil, trap additives and things like that. So again, going back to the previous slide, there is a limitation to the amount of polymers that you can put in a formulation to drive the VI. So, study, just quickly going through this study, what we did we looked at different polymers in combinations, and I'll show some details on this. But if you'll see on the little chart there, we looked at polymers at 5%, 10%, and 20% in those ratios, and then we put them in typical base stocks like Group 2, Group 3, and PAOs. And we looked at somewhat around 81 formulations, and we looked at the trending in VI, pour point, and the behavior of the viscosity index. So let me jump into a bit of detail. I'm going to take myself off the screen for a second so you can see this. But in this case, we look at pour point on the left, formulating cost on the bottom. And if you look at this in great detail, you will see that, of course, Group 2 and polybutenes and OCP, very inexpensive formulation, but there's some limitations to the pour point. Then you look at the other end of the scale, looking at PAO, polybutenes, and OCP. Yes, you get better pour point, but it drives your cost. Now keep it in mind, I realize that Group 3s and PAOs are coming closer to closer in cost as in this market that we're in today. But this was a bit of older data, and you can see the difference when you start looking at PMAs, PMAs plus OCPs, PMAs plus OCPs in Group 2. There's some an inexpensive formulation and has a pretty good pour point. So these are things that we discovered as we looked through this study. So just to summarize the study, the key findings is the PMA plus the OC combination had a very good cost performance there. Of course, again, some limitations against the PAO, as you saw on the chart. Group 2, of course, had some performance advantages, and that's due to some of the wax characteristics that you see in the Group 2 versus the Group 3. Of course, PAO gave you extremely good performance, but they're at a cost. So these are things, again, you have to look at the individual chemistry in combinations with the base stocks and the performance parameters to make a determination. So looking at it a little bit different from a viscosity modifier blending versus VI versus cost. And again, you'll see Group 2 PMA and polybutene, it's lower cost, and you're going to have some limitations to the VI lift you can get. Group 3 PMA plus OCP, yeah, very good VI lift, and makes a extremely a good case to maybe look at those combinations of polymers in formulation. So, and again, PAO it has some benefits there, but there's definitely some variability in the cost versus VI lift that you can get. So let's shift gears a little bit. So keeping in mind the polymers that you looked at and the advantages and disadvantages of each, I want to show you something new. So, in the world of formulating, especially high viscosity index gear oils, and that automotive 75-140 is what I want to key on. I'll show you some data on this. Getting the right viscosity and being able to meet shear requirements is crucial. And those can be a very expensive formulation. So this is something you need to consider. And the benefits and the advantages here is when you use a viscosity index improver, there's benefits around Brookfield. The challenge is something with shear. You put a polymer in it with shear. Base oil viscosities, there's some, you can use some different combinations of base oils, but again, there's some challenges to all of that. So, polymers have their benefits up to a certain degree, and that's what you really have to take in consideration. So When you're looking at Euros specifically, you have to consider the automotive, the J306, and some of the industrial spec and the OEM specs that you have to meet. And so I want to show you a couple of things around polymethacrylates, because we have polymethacrylates on our line, and then something new, this V705 synthetic base fluid. And then we will also I'll show a little bit of data with our gear package. So, shear stability, how we measure this and how a lot of things are looked at, from hydraulics to gear, is the 20-hour KRL. And so, normally there is a requirement of less than 15% shear loss in that 20-hour KRL. Even some OEMs have some more stringent shear loss. So these are things you have to take in consideration. There's really no shear in base stocks. So, what you're having to consider is the other components in there, and try to reduce components that will shear, but also meet your viscosity requirements for that specific fluid. So, again, looking at our PMA line, and at the very top of this chart, and sorry, this is a little busy also. Let me take myself off here so you can see this. At the very top is our most shear stable PMA. And this is a typical PMA out in the industry, and it's about 15% in KRL. So you can already see when you start talking about some shear requirements, you really have to watch that. So now, look at the very bottom. And just one other thing to point out, the thickening efficiency, that's something you have to consider. How much polymer you have to put in there to get that lift that you need. But look at that base stock at the very bottom. So I want to kind of characterize this a bit. This base stock is about as shear stable as a PAO. It has the viscosity, lift, and solubility of a PMA, but it has the thickening efficiency almost like an OCP. So it's almost the best of all worlds when you consider the other polymers out there. So moving along here, what is the V705? This is a pure liquid hydrocarbon. It has a viscosity of about 6,500 to 100 C. Don't be too concerned about that, because it has kind of handling viscosity of typical other polymers out there, the PIB 32, the PIB 1000. It's clear and colorless, which is critical. And also the standard deviation from batch to batch is very good. So it's just like any other synthetic base stock. It's very stable. What we're going to target and talk about a little bit about today is what I've already mentioned, a Group 3 75-140. So keep that in mind, a Group 3 75-140. And then also some aviation fluids, looking at some synthetic base stocks. And then we've actually evaluated this. If you want more information later, my contact information is at the end, around shock absorber, heavy engine oils, and racing engine oils. So let's start with the 75-140. So if you'll look at this formulation quickly, in that middle column, I have formulated something with a Group 3, 14% of the V705, one of our PPDs, PD630, and a typical limited slip package, automotive package. The Brookfields, 30,000. That's kind of unheard of, even for the most sophisticated base stocks in the market. We've done some work with a 7590, got 20,000. So we've used multiple packages, and then we've also evaluated other base stocks, other pour points, lower the pour point, looked at other packages, and we're still getting a passing. If you're familiar with the 75-140, you have to be under 150,000 centistokes at minus 40. And so this product is outperforming anything else on the marketplace. So jumping ahead a little bit, just looking at some Group 2 gear oils. Keep in mind that Group 2 takes a little bit of cost out, and then using the V705, we can build ISO grades all the way out to 2200. The product does excellent thickening. And so that's something to also consider. Looking at something like around a EAL fluid, or using it with a PAO. Again, it shines in this case, and it has some excellent viscosity indexes. Of course, the shear is very low, so this is making a ultra premium product in that line. Something to consider, and this is a little bit busy chart, but I want just some food for thought. I know there's a lot of base stocks and a lot of polymers that are short. I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but we looked at it to replace like bright stock. Considering that bright stock is a less expensive chemistry, a base stock, but think about in your portfolio with things that you're short on, somewhere that you could thicken something up, reduce your base stock, reduce your polymers, reduce your pour point. In fact, you could even reduce your package to some degree and use a less expensive package and still build a very premium like a 75-140. So just some food for thought there. Aviation 5606, this is a critical spec. That 5606H has a -54 spec. And we looked at PMA, and then we looked at the V705, and it outshines the PMA and then is much better on shear. So something to consider for premium military spec or even premium high VI hydraulic fluids. So you might consider that. We also made some TO4 fluids. Those are very critical items. They have a lot of load, a lot of pressures, a lot of sliding wear, and we use the V705 with some group 3s, and we can meet some SAE grades very easily. So a little bit of data here. You'll have the slides, and so, but again, sheared in grade and had some excellent brook fields. So a very good place to be able to use the V705. We also kind of looked at all the different base stocks, from group 1 to group 5, and we found that this V705 is compatible in about everything. Just a few things that we found some incompatibility was with the MPAO, which those can be tough sometimes, and some blown vegetable oils. But everything else, very compatible with. Just a little bit on clarity. That's always a little bit of an issue with gear oils, both industrial and automotive. And you can see here on the left is a product made, a finished formulation, 75-140 with no ester and with a V705. Then consider a formulation using a PAO with no ester, very hazy. So think about that for a second. If you go back and think about that formulation I showed you, group 3 and the V705 is the only viscosity type building products that you need in this, no ester. So that takes out some cost. So, and then you still get very excellent clarity on the product. We did do some elastomer testing. I'm definitely not an elastomer expert, but what we have found, it has no harm. In fact, we got a little bit of swell from the base stock, which you typically want because the other chemistry and things like PAOs and things like that, they actually shrink the seal, so you actually need some some enhancement there. With the V705, got a slight increase across different types of rubbers. So a little bit of data there. Please contact me if you want more detail on this. Getting down to looking at the price competitiveness of this product, and I'm just going to look at the 75-140 because that's always critical. So in this chart right here, we're going to actually show the treat of the base stock or the polymer, if you will. And you see the V705. MB1010 is a PMA-based base stock that we have, then a typical PMA, and then an MPAO. Yes, the V705, slightly higher economics versus some of the other chemistries, but then you look at the treat cost, the total formulating cost, and versus the other chemistry, it shines. So you might even consider 30 to 40% cost savings in a 75-140. So just a few details on this product. And again, if you contact me directly, I can assist with this. But it is REACH registered. It is a pure liquid, so it's not a solid. It's not something you have to solubilize. We have a little bit of oxidative stability there, 400-minute RPDOT with the V705. So we have a lot of experience in dealing with polymers, formulations, and looking for solutions for customers. This was something that is comes along not very often. So please contact me on this because we can help you with your mining, open gearboxes, automotive gear, this high VI hydraulic fluids. We can assist you in several places. So please, there's my contact information. I want to thank Dr. Jake Sugar and Dr. Eric Willett. They accumulated a lot of the data here and pulled together a lot of the formulating work, and they can also assist with any formulation work. So thank you for your time today, and please contact me if you have questions.